This is Patrick Roth, Senior Support Technician for E1 Business Solutions. A common question that we get is, if I'm using a folder data source in a map, how can I tell in my map what data the source record came from? Which file was it? Now, of course, if I had one file in my source folder, that actually is not too difficult, in that obviously it came from that one. So if you know that for the process you're running, that you only get one file per day, and the map runs at whatever time the map runs at when the user runs it, there's always ever going to only be one file. Well, that's pretty easy. We could actually just query the folder and find the name and put it in a global variable. That wouldn't be too difficult. But usually I'll have between 0 and many files, and it runs, and there could be any of the above. And so we can't use that trick. We need to know exactly which file each row does. Now, since SmartConnect's not going to tell us, the only way we can find out is, again, we'd have to query the directory to find the files. But since the data lines would be each, and it all gets mixed up when SmartConnect processes the folder data source, it reads all of the folders, not just the first one. It reads all of the folders that match, and then it takes the data, collates it all, depending on how you have your key field set up, and runs. So we can't just assume that it's the first file it finds. The second file, it's all mixed up in it. So what we'd have to do is we'd have to physically modify the file itself to actually put the name in. Now, of course, the easiest way about that is, if where you get the files from, could the vendor or your users or whatever just add that into the data, and then now you don't have to fool with it. But assuming that nope, this is how the files come, then we would have to do it ourselves. So if we look at this scenario, I'm going to have a source file, and it's going to be very simple. Columns C1 to C4, and then some data. In this case, I have two. I have a source 1 and source 2 file. Obviously, they're both same headers, and then it has two different records, C and D, just to make it interesting. And so now I have 4 unique records in 2 source files. So if I'm going to modify this and add a column name, then obviously my template needs to have that too. So if I look at my template, I have my C1 through 4, and then I've added a column called file name to it as a 5th column, and then there's no data in my template, which is fine. And so I have that. Now if I go into my map, I define my template, and I created a schema already, and then my source folder, and my success and my fail. If it succeeds, I'll move the file pen date time, and of course the key field to C1 doesn't really matter for our example. In this case, we're also going to write it to a destination file. I'm just going to write to that des folder, and there's nothing horribly interesting about this. And then I just dump the columns the same order, and we tack on the file name. Now again, if I don't have any code that does this, my template file has 5 columns. My source file has 4, and so if I would disable this task, or I didn't have this task, SmartConnect should actually skip that file, or both files, because they don't match the template. In our case, we do want to do this. So in order to do this, we can write a task script then that'll do this for us. And so we're going to declare this source file string variable, and we're just going to hard code our path to the folder, and a couple of counting variables, and this list line object to hold our new destination. While I run the directory info get folder against that path and find all the CSVs. So in this case, it'll find our two files that we have. Makes a new list line object, makes a new list, increments our counter. We grab all of the lines in that. So this was 2 million records. It might take a bit for .NET to read it all, but assuming you have a fairly regular amount of data, shouldn't be too bad. It's going to read all of those lines into this line list object. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to look at line 0. Line 0 is the first row. Our first row is the headers. So we're going to look to see if it has the word file name in it that we added. If it does, then we just skip it with the continue for, and we go on. This might happen if you have to reprocess a file because there was some kind of problem. And so we will grab that and we'll just skip it, and otherwise we continue on. So now we'll continue on. So let's assume it doesn't have a header. So the first thing we do is we're incrementing our counter. We have this I equals 0. So if it's the first time we're doing this, this is our new file, and the output of the new file needs those same headers. So we're going to grab that line of our headers, and we're going to tack on comma file name as we saw in the template. If not, then that means we are on actual data rows. And so it's going to grab the line that we're going to put the comma in, and then we're going to put in the name of the file that we got from the directory info structure. And this is going to spin through all the rows and be done. When we're finally finished with all of the rows of that source file, in my case it was just 2 rows, so it'll be easy and quick. We could have copied the original file someplace. We could have renamed it. In this head, we just said the heck with it. We don't care about the original file name. This is going to be fine. And so we're just going to write back our new list array back over the top of the file. So it's going to overwrite it as is. And then lastly, it's going to, in our case, we have two records, two source files. And so it's going to spin through, it's going to get the next one, and it's going to do the same for the second one. And lastly, we want our map prescript to return true. This is very simple. I don't have any error checking. It's all very straightforward. If you were going to do this in production, you'd probably want to use try-catch blocks and write a little bit nicer to do some checks and whatnot, but it's fine. Last thing you do, you always want to make sure you validate it just to make sure you didn't have any typos. Saves you some headache later. In this case, looks fine. So if we go back to our data, let's grab our 2 source rows, paste them into here. So now I paste them into our source. Save our script. Yes, we want to run the map, save. First thing we notice is that we do have a record count. So what that tells us is that it processed both files. Why that's exciting is, again, since the original file didn't have a column file name, and now it does, that really suggests that this must have ran, or at least it pulled it and added it to it. Maybe there's no data. If we look in our destination, here's our output file we just generated. And again, looks like it worked. We see our add additional column name, and we see source 1 for these 2 rows, which was correct. We see source 2 for these 2 rows, which also correct. So our script did run. It did find all of the files. It did write a column 5 with the name. And so in our map destination, we could have used that for whatever we need to do it for, and this did work.